morning I was kind of scrolling through Facebook and I saw an ad that I thought was interesting, and it said Biblical Worldview Resource. And it's an ad for this resource, and basically they were going to give churches that are between 100 and 1,000 members this resource for free. And the resource, the ad talks about when politics divides our nation, many Christian homes, schools, and churches are confused about their role. It also says that's why we're giving out a free 2020 election booklet on politics entitled Christian Worldview of Politics, What is the Role of the Christian? Now, I remember in seminary, it was kind of just one of those things where it was told, like stay away from things that are really can be divisive, like politics and things of that nature. There was this one comment that someone made, and this person said religion and politics should stay separate. And as I have pastored over the years, I begin to see that becomes a little difficult. And so I actually responded to the post, and I said this: Moses went to Pharaoh to free the Hebrews. Joseph became second in command of Egypt because God meant it for good. David, who wrote the Psalms, was a king. Esther was queen who got political to prevent the Holocaust of the Israelites. All the prophets, the prophetic books, they consult kings. John the Baptist even confronted King Herod publicly. Jesus stood in front of the Roman governor Pilate and spoke of God's kingdom. And the list goes on and on. God's people have always been involved in the politics of their day. It's modeled throughout Scripture, and that's why America exists. And then I go on to say, the only people who don't want God's voice to lead a nation are those who have personally rejected it. These individuals are hardly reliable guides on how Christians should function in a free society. And so I'm basically saying that we do see precedent where it's modeled in Scripture, which leads me to my devotion. Pride, the foolishness of the wicked. And when we look at Proverbs and Psalms, it's wisdom literature. This is about gaining wisdom. And it's not about gaining wisdom in church life. It's not gaining wisdom in certain compartments of our life. It's about God's people gaining wisdom and instruction, hearing His voice in every area of our life. And I did it out of Psalm chapter 10, verse 4. And this is what that psalm says. I'm reading out of the New American Standard Bible. The wicked in their haughtiness of his countenance does not seek Him. All his thoughts are, there is no God. And I really spent some time on the words of this scripture. It's very clear in the various translations that the person that scripture is talking about is the wicked man or woman. The wickedness. And when it says the haughtiness of his countenance in the New American Standard Bible, it can also be translated pride, like in the NIV and ESV, King James Version. They use the word pride. Haughtiness is also translated as arrogance in the Holman Bible. So pride, arrogance, haughtiness. So if I look at it again, the wickedness in their pride does not seek God. That's what he's saying. All his thoughts are there is no God. So on all of their thoughts, meaning that there is no God in all of their thought life. And that's what the New American Standard Bible. But if you were to look at the NIV, it translates it a little different. It says, in all his thoughts, there is no room for God. And think about it. It's talking about all your thoughts. All of the translations acknowledges in this person's complete thought life, the wicked person, their complete thought life, there is no God. NIV, there is no room for God in all of their thought life. The Good News Translation says, in their pride, they think that God does not matter. The New Living Translation gives this idea: they seem to think that God is dead. The Berean Study Bible says, in all his schemes, there is no God. And also the Holman and the Christian Standard Bible says, there is no accountability since there is no God. If you erase God from society, it's a society that's not accountable. That's really interesting, because it's not saying that the fool in his heart believes there's no God. It's saying that the wicked person, because they're prideful, when they look and they think and they act in this world, they look and they think and they believe things, and they have a worldview and they have a wisdom that does not include God. They're not accountable for decisions or thoughts, repercussions. There's no high moral standard in their decisions. Their thought life, they are actually God. There's no accountability. And that's how they process the world, and that's why they're wicked. And when you look at Proverbs and Psalms, it's showing the difference between the wise person and the fool. A fool would say, there's no God. We're not accountable. We should keep the things of God out of politics, because wisdom is okay just as it is without him. That's contrary to the Christian life, the Christian belief, to the Psalms, to the Proverbs. God has something to say in every area of life. When someone says God has no place in this conversation, God has no place in my marriage, in my friendship, God has no place in my country, in my morality, in my decision making, in all areas of how I think and see. We as Christians need to be able to see them rightly. They are what the Bible calls a fool. Wicked. And it's important that the distinction is made. The distinction is made. We live in a culture where we really don't see rightly. We don't discern. And so the Christian needs to say, when I'm talking to somebody, or I hear a narrative, or I hear an opinion, is this opinion or thought or belief shaped by God? If God is omitted from the conversation, the source cannot be trusted. It's foolishness, it's wicked, and it's probably going to lead to something that is completely ungodly and wicked. So I leave you with this thought and question. Doesn't the world need to hear the wisdom of God? Doesn't the people of our country, of our community, in our families, in our friendships, don't they need to hear the wisdom of God? Don't you want God's wisdom? Fools have had their day in our society. We have foolish talk, foolish worldviews, foolishness pervades. And so God has something to say. And that's why God's given us His Word. He's given us Proverbs and Psalms and the Gospels. And so I just want to encourage you today, guys, to continue to plug into the wisdom of God as we look at Proverbs and Psalms. And let's grow into full spiritual maturity, where we can discern the things of God in every area of life.